morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Billy Bob from the West Coast, and I've got my co-host Ben Toth and special guest Ian Kummer. Ben's in Pécs, Hungary. Ian is in a Moscow suburb. Should we do weather or should we not do weather?
I mean,
the same as last week, basically.
Yeah, we have some scattered white parts, but not really snow anymore. It's just muddy, but cold.
It's not raining here at the moment, but the ground is wet. So what's changed since we actually had a Saturday episode? We talked a lot about Ukraine and Israel on Saturday's episode. We also had a Friday episode. Anything really exciting has happened since Saturday, guys?
I mean, what we didn't have when Saturday, Dimitri Laskaris was our guest, who brought up a very interesting account from someone he actually knew, a New York person, I think, who visited Ukraine, right? That heart-wrenching Twitter saying 1 million are dead, people are hating Zelensky and hating the West, which I thought was significant. And after that, today is when we have really big rumors. It came from Telegram first, but today I read an article on the Asia Times about the palace intrigue going on in Kiev. It really looks like things are speeding up. So I just want to lay out the first one, which is by this guy, Stephen Bryan, the Asia Times article. And it goes along with the same thing that TASS and RT reported, that Sergei Narishkin, who is the foreign intelligence chief of Russia, said, that there's this compromat, which is a compromising dossier on Zelensky, and the US is forcing him to clear house, basically get rid of a lot of the corrupt officials. But this article, Stephen Bryan's one, goes further. Basically, Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief, will be replaced with this fanatic SBU guy. Budanov, Budanov, yeah. And he's going to be basically in charge of what's left of the war front in Ukraine. But this article goes further, saying even the rest of the government might move west to Lviv or the collective West as a whole. It's looking that close. I mean, one other piece of news that was from NBC, but picked up by Russia again, that without aid, this thing could collapse. The battlefront could collapse in weeks to months. So there's a whole lot of panic, especially in Western Europe, about this, not so much in the Americas, but I'm loving it. I mean, even the brain-damaged mayor of Kiev, Mr. Klitschko, came out that Zelensky is looking very authoritarian. So everybody hates everybody right now. Budanov, Zaluzhny, Zelensky, and there's a whole lot of opaque. I mean, we don't have eyes in Kiev. That looks to be going on, and things are not looking good. Ian would know a bit more about this with really massive surrenders, the huge advances. I think it's sped up around Avdiivka, the last real bastion, fortified town in the Donetsk region. And of course, when they're impotent, they do something stupid, which was the terrorist attack on the Donetsk city. Something like 20 people died. But that's lashing out, zero effect on military matters, just an attack. So I'm wondering, I don't know if you guys have, explored a bit of this, but there's a lot of headlessness in Kiev, whichever you prefer. Thoughts?
Any thoughts on that, Ian?
Well, I want to mention that Twitter thread that was viral. Do you have a screenshot of that by any chance?
It's unfortunately taller than a screen, but I can sort of look for it if you guys want to.
Well, I was going to say it's this woman who visited some places in it sounded like southwestern Ukraine, I think. I don't remember where she said she visited, but and from the sounds of it, some areas that are hardest hit with the conscription. They don't go after the bankers' sons in Kyiv. They go after these villages and smaller towns, and it sounds very depressed. And she opened her tweet with, "There's 1 million dead." Now, I think the rest of the tweet was just talking about the general mood is pretty accurate from what I've seen, but it'd be strange for the actual losses to be more than double what Russia's saying, because they have they've pegged it around 400,000 irrecoverable losses. So I think that's a little sensational. And also, you're just asking people on the street; they're not going to know. There's no way they can know what the actual casualties.
Of course not. That could be an overstatement. But what she gives us an account of is the mood in general in society. You know, the males hiding at home, not even going to the shopping centers, to the gym, to night places. But
because it is true that there have been a lot of speculation. There's no way to know because there was that ancient census from more than 20 years ago that's not relevant, doesn't take into account all the outward migration. So a lot of people made guesses that there were at the start of this 3 to 5 million military age males who could be recruited into the army. So, if you, it's possible you've eaten a third of that or more just in less than 2 months or 2 years of fighting, which would be pretty, because you can't send 100% of your males. Your economy and society collapses before that happens. So it's looking very depressing. Yes. Though, as far as the coup, as far as getting rid of Zelensky goes, well, we have to remember 1964 Vietnam. There was a coup there. And that meant, another 10 years of war. It's not going to, this one is not going to go 10 years. It can't. But
no.
When you have your sponsor who's insisting you clean house and talking about deposing the strong man at the head of it, I mean, that does suggest the intent, at least, is to keep this going, because there's no point in trying to clean house right before you leave. It doesn't make sense.
True. I want to add that this guy, Stephen Bryan, who wrote this piece for the Asia Times, he's like, you can think of him as the weapons guy. He's well connected in the DC sort of national security, also cyber security think tanks. He's that kind of commentator. So he would have the sources necessary to know, what's being pressured in Ukraine. And the other kind of telling part of this was the Financial Times of London, but it's owned by Nikkei, a Japanese company, but it's still London based. The London perspective had this huge, basically a fluff piece for Budanov, the guy who loves to stay in the dark room or something like that. And the photo was like that, in the dark room. And apparently he's got like folk legend status. He's very popular. He's the man for the job. And they didn't say where, but his neck and back were broken. But, he's sort of this James Bond. They did everything to push this guy up, because I don't think he's anywhere near as popular as Zaluzhny, but there does seem to be a big effort to sort of clean house. I don't know if it's before the end. Go.
But yeah, I'd say yes, I think that's true. He's got a folk hero status, and he's a guy who would be qualified to keep the government from collapsing, to suppress dissent. He might be your go-to guy if you want to coup and just to clean house and get the corruption down to manageable levels.
And you brought up the idea that he might move the government west or all the way out of the country and have like a government in exile.
Yeah, well, Stephen Bryan brought that up, in his article.
The West is really good at creating these governments in exile that they pretend are the legitimate government. I mean, there's a Uyghur Congress. It's like the government in exile of the Xinjiang province, and even Steve Bannon has a billionaire, a Chinese billionaire friend, and they have a government in exile, the legitimate Chinese government in exile. It's Steve Bannon's billionaire friend. But yeah, these things have marginal utility, sometimes more benefits than at other times for the West. But definitely, if you want to just create a situation where you can't negotiate with Russia and you force Russia into a long-term fighting a low-grade insurgency kind of thing, yeah, it makes sense that Budanov would be the person that could do that, like Ian was saying.
He's not a military commander. He never commanded a battalion. He's like the foreign intelligence chief. He's basically responsible for these terror attacks that killed Daria Dugina.
Terrorism and that kind of thing.
And
also repressing internal dissent, with his intelligence background. But
well, also if you have an intelligence chief like that, he's going to be smart enough to not be trying to command. I don't think Zelensky is actually smart enough to do that, to be hands off. I do think Zelensky's been pushing his nonsensical opinions on things he doesn't know about, but I think Budanov would be a lot smarter than that. He would leave that battlefield decisions to the professionals and stick with what he's good at, which is rooting out potential coups before they happen, rooting out corruption down to manageable levels. I think that's probably what they're doing. I don't think we're going to see, because if the government moves westward, or let alone moves outside the country, then it's really over. I think that's a last ditch solution. That we're still far away from that, unless the weapon systems don't start coming back.
The thing is, there's either a realization or some sort of panic going along in NATO and Western Europe, even though Jan Stoltenberg, the NATO SecGen, said that Russia doesn't pose any immediate threat to NATO allies at this moment. We're just preparing, but they're still doing the biggest it's a drill or exercise, not the Valiant Defender, but something like that. Like
Poseidon Archer.
Oh, Poseidon Archer, that's in the Red Sea. No.
Oh,
this one's a big
Yes.
European thing with NATO.
Cold defense, something like that.
Stout Guardian or Stalwart Guardian or something.
Steadfast Defender 2024. It just began. It's going to take about 2 months, and 90,000 personnel are going to take part in it. And there was this series of articles like Europe's preparing for Ukraine's defeat, and people are in a panic. Obviously, the Baltic midgets were the first saying this year or 2 years Russia will attack us. Ben Hodges ran a Daily Mail piece saying 2044 for some reason. He's a 20-year window. There was the British defense chief, Grant Shapps. He said we got 5 years until China and Russia and Iran are going to get to the inflection point that Europe's going to be at war. There's a lot of this thing. But one piece which I thought was the most important came out from NATO, the official NATO thing, and I read it in full. And it concluded contracts for 1.2 billion worth of artillery ammunition, the 155. That's really, there's other articles from the battlefront saying they're really low on stuff. They're using horses because there's not so much motorized stuff. These are in the German press. These, if you dig deeper in the article, it says 220,000 of these shells. What is that? A month's worth in a conflict as intense as Ukraine? But you go down, it says it's to replenish the Western allies, basically stockpiles, and maybe send some to Ukraine. And then you get to the very end, but it won't be quick. It will take around 24 to 36 months for them to appear. That means 2026-7. That's the reality here. Even if they say, "Oh, we're mighty, we can fight Russia. Look at us," and doing this PR, this media manipulation thing with all the look at our 70s helicopters. Look at all this beautiful stuff. We will talk a bit later about Slovakia, but the incoming defense minister said we have no air defense, we have no aircraft, we're giving everything to Ukraine, and we haven't even got paid for it. And I think that's a widespread reality on the continent, and this tells me a lot. You can posture all you like in Finland, in the little Baltic states. The reality is really grim, and I think it's terrifying to a lot of Western European leaders. That's just my impression. Might not be.
That's that's the overall truth, and that's what we know with certainty, is that things aren't going well, which is leading to the reticence of the West to continue to invest in this thing that's not going well, and all the palace intrigue and all the drama about who's going to be taking over the leadership, and is Zelensky going to stay, is Budanov going to come in, what about Zaluzny? All this stuff, wouldn't be happening if things were going well for Ukraine. But we should find out with relative quickness, what their plan is.
I don't think they can do like a mission accomplished moment that George W. Bush did, on the aircraft carrier. But Blinken, the state.gov, the big official account, said Russia is suffering a strategic defeat. So that seems to be the new narrative. Even if they win, like everywhere, then it's somehow a strategic defeat. But I think there's a lot of copium going on nowadays. The latest missile strikes, which haven't stopped, they've been going on tonight. They're on Kharkov mostly, where the French mercenaries got slaughtered the other day, and now there was a follow-up strike. All of the stuff around Kiev, where apparently the Russian Air Force just flies around the defenses, no worries. So the whole Patriot system is no longer a worry, and there's not going to be investments. Maybe we want to shift to talking about the draining of the Western support. Hungary and Slovakia are keeping Europe from paying anything to Ukraine. The Republicans apparently are keeping the US from paying anything. And one of the headlines was he came back from Davos, right, from Switzerland, the WEF, and he came back empty-handed, was the headline. I mean, the Swiss coughed up 1.25 or 1.75 billion in Swedish krona, and that was it. And he met with Jamie Dimon, the Chase banker. He met with the BlackRock people, but all of those people, it seems, saying, "Oh, well, we're not sure, about the outcome, and no dollars for you right now." It looks like it's being dropped to me, like faster than I expected.
Well, so it's January, and so we do have so we've had. Basically, we've seen what was requested for 2023 and 2024 from the DoD and for their budget. So, it does list what they're buying in new weapon systems and munitions. And there's been no increase. There's actually been a decrease in the available stockpile of GMLRS of the HIMARS rounds and Patriot interceptors.
Yeah,
if they were going to flood Ukraine with these munitions, they would have needed to already start doing that, and they haven't. There's been no money allocated to even attempt that. And I think it's even less to do with money. I mean, they could say we're going to spend $100 billion, we're going to spend $200 billion, $300 billion, but right now we have hard limits with the factories we have now. Those are just the hard limits of our manufacturing capacity without a massive investment to build more, and that can't be done overnight. So this is just what the USA and other NATO countries can do. They're not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Europe deindustrialized pretty swiftly, but the US isn't. I mean, to expand logistics in a factory the way Russia has done, in these places, I think it would take 3 to 4 years. Russia has done it in under a year because I think they were already well prepared for something like this, but it's just a logistics impossibility, and that's what they're facing. Yeah.
And economically, go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say, and economically, just economically. So as far as the how do you say that word? The Hryvnia.
Hryvnia is how we say it. But...
Hryvnia. Yes. The problem with it is that it's pegged to the dollar, as in the USA, not even the Ukrainian government. The USA uses capital controls to keep that exchange rate where they want it. And the problem is that if the money flow is interrupted, you just have an immediate collapse. You have hyperinflation. It's just, and Ukraine just becomes a failed state overnight. So that's even if there's no war, that's the situation they're in. They cannot go a month without external support.
Exactly what the Wall Street Journal talked about over the weekend. Like, do we delay basically salary payments or keep printing money? And it's sort of listed these negative, like, we can't just do what the US does. Basically what you said. Deep black hole of trouble is what they're looking at.
And the private munitions manufacturers in the West, they're not going to invest in additional factories unless there's a guarantee, unless they can, they're guaranteed, a big contract, and otherwise they're not going to do it because they don't trust the politicians to make peace. And then, all this investment, they're gonna end up losing a bunch of money. So that's one of the limitations of the running a war based on capitalism kind of thing.
Well, they just have to be paid up front, but no one's willing to pay them up front because we're talking probably trillions of dollars to even.
Yeah. I mean, that's the key here. The huge difference in the military industrial complexes of Russia, and I would add China, because it's the same. It's built for defense, not for market purposes, and the collective West, who've been, sleeping under the US umbrella under NATO for a long time. And now suddenly, stops are empty. US is nowhere to be seen because it's bogged down in the Red Sea. And I think the main thinking is, what the fuck do we do now? I mean, the French Macron said, if Russia wins, it's getting more and more certain, then it will control 30% of the world's wheat. There's a lot of these panicking exclamations right now. The Süddeutsche Zeitung, the German magazine, it says, Europe prepares for Ukraine's defeat. Simple headline, like outspoken, which I didn't see last year.
No, I'll believe it when I see it. And the reason why is because we've seen this multiple times already. There is, because that's kind of the flip side of the war reporting. On one side, it's Russia is going to collapse at any moment, and then those same outlets just say, our side is going to collapse at any moment. It's like, well, which is it? Is Russia going to collapse or is Ukraine? They can't both be true at once. But I think it's the fear report. Just like, oh, if we don't approve this spending bill, Ukraine will collapse and Europe will be conquered the next week. So I think it's a deliberate tactic, just get people riled up and scared. Like, and I was reading the news about, that Sweden's announcement telling the people, oh, we could be, I don't remember the exact time frame they gave, within the next 5 years or something like that, they could be at war with Russia. It had people scared, had people literally calling the...
you should have battery-powered radios and flashlights. I think that was the Swedish guys, like absolute fear-mongering going on.
It gets people worked up, and that makes them more inclined to accept more money going to Ukraine is what I think. I think that's the tactic, and there might be some conflicts. There might be some conflicts of interest here. I do think there's a couple different factions within USA itself. I think our civilian authorities think the Biden administration. I think the State Department want to go all in, and then there's people in the Pentagon who have lost interest. And I want to bring up actually, I don't want to change the topic too much, but I want to bring up the Lloyd Austin controversy.
It's been 3 weeks since he hasn't been seen, and apparently, but go ahead. I think we just have a still picture of him finally appearing.
Well, and I think if you want to show that picture, sure. Yeah. But so
by the way, as you can see, Zaluzhny is still in charge. This is the Ramstein format, the NATO-Ukraine interface meeting that they hold pretty much annually, I think.
So the thing about Lloyd Austin is that there was, so he's he's Captain Raytheon. He's the Raytheon pick. He's he's very in line with Biden's foreign policy objectives. So he's very much a political choice. And I think, especially during the COVID years, it was all about bringing the military in line with Democrats' line of thinking, because, Pentagon was always kind of right-leaning, Republican-leaning, and it's shifted towards the Democrats. And Austin was all about, bringing them to heel, basically.
Yeah.
And I do think there's something of a soft coup going on, and he's a part of it because, there's no way your own boss disappears for several days and no one notices. If you forget, maybe the man himself is in a panic because he came back positive for prostate cancer, and so he went to the hospital, just didn't care about reporting. But there's no one in your own office would say, oh, okay, let's figure out what's going on with him. Then they report it, and that gets cleared up in a few hours. There's no embarrassment. I think his office is just like, well, you know what? We're just not going to say anything. This is why I think happened. I think people in his own office were just like, you know what? We're just not going to say anything. We're going to let our boss get in trouble and get pulled into these congressional inquiries and all that. Let him. He made that mistake. We're just going to let him run with that mistake and not interrupt him.
It is so strange that during this, the Red Sea was already red with daily developments, crucial developments for the U.S., and a guy can just disappear like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's a political choice. And here's the thing also about Austin. So his biggest controversy, even when he was nominated for the job, was that during that whole fight with ICE back in 2014, 2015, he was widely accused of tampering with intelligence gathering to make ISIS look weaker than it actually was. I think that's definitely relevant when it comes to probably both Ukraine and Yemen. There's politicizing the intelligence gathering. I think that Pentagon leak last spring was very clear that our own intelligence analysts were just copying, pasting Ukrainian claims, which isn't what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to just take someone's word for it that something is true, for God's sake. But
so he's still in the we can win, just send money camp. Just so you know, I only read the description of his short, webcam video appearance, but it was basically, this is no time for hesitation, cough up the money. That was the gist of it. That's why he appeared. So he's still a very political animal when it comes to Ukraine.
Yeah, so I think underneath him, there's pushback. There's no interest in escalating this further. And so and that might be why we're getting these mixed messages about Ukraine. It's just that there's not everybody agrees anymore. Yeah. There was a lot of agreement at the beginning, Even if you look at military people in the Pentagon, they were always a little closer to reality, even right at the beginning. Say, back in March and April 2022, they were saying, well, this is a good time for Ukraine to negotiate from a position of strength. That was a pretty mainstream Pentagon viewpoint from retired generals, for not like hacks like Ben Hodges, but actually credible military sources in the USA. This is a good time for Ukraine to negotiate from a position of strength. And they were basically the only people saying it. The Bidens and the Austins and all those guys were saying, no, they need to take even more territory, not realizing the situation is going to get worse for them, which of course it did.
Yeah, so and Zelensky is busy saying no to negotiations as well, and he's doing these decrees right now, decreeing Russian territories as historically Ukrainian, which is just the maddest thing you could expect. But there you go. He's not behaving, is he? Go ahead, Billy Bob. Sorry.
Well, I was just trying to. So Ian's analysis is that there's some divisions with regards to strategies vis-a-vis Israel, vis-a-vis Ukraine. And some of it goes back to a liberal versus conservative, a Republican versus Democrat divide. And so people within, what's his name? What's the guy, Captain? This guy. What's this guy's name?
Oh, Lord Raytheon. Lloyd Austin.
Austin. So even within Austin's own office, there's a willingness to let him look bad and, to let the people pursuing the current strategy, fail and flounder around kind of a thing. But it comes back to a Republican-Democrat divide and also just a divide over, the basic strategy towards Israel and towards Ukraine. Did I get that right? Or am I way off base?
Yeah, and I would say I agree. I would say it's even more basic than Democrats versus Republican or liberals versus conservatives. Is just military versus State Department and CIA.
That's the correct sections. I think what Ian was describing, 2001, George W. Jr., the Republicans were the war party. Let's bomb everywhere. And especially the last couple of years, during Biden, the Democrats became the absolute war party. And I think Lord Raytheon sort of brought the Pentagon into that fold. Did I sort of understand that correctly?
Yes, but I think there's quite a bit of pushback. They did treat, I don't want to question the medical efficiency of certain things that you two might disagree with, but they very much used the vaccinations as a political weapon. It's just, because there are people who are going to be like, well, you know what, this does not have the usual FDA approvals because there are drugs and vaccines that military people just have to take, but this was a new thing that's pretty unusual even for the military, and so there are a lot of people just like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with taking this, but this was used as a loyalty test. It's like you either take it or you get out. So I think that's just like, they want that unconditional obedience, but I think Biden really overplayed that, and there was a lot of negative pushback. And I think a lot of that negative pushback was directed at Austin himself. And also just, workplace diversity and equal, just these litmus tests, these loyalty tests are used to condition people to be unconditionally obedient. I think that caused a lot of negativity. And then when you have Ukraine, where you're just denying reality every day, that causes even more pushback, especially for military people, because they're just like, well, you know what? I don't think any of them sit there and say, I want to go to war with Russia. I think that's a very rare opinion in the Pentagon. But you go to the State Department, you're like, oh, yeah, we could win a war with Russia. It's depends which office of people you asked, you'll get a completely different answer. And I think that's where the controversy is.
Nuland and his group would definitely want to destroy Russia, whatever it takes. That's basically.
Yeah, they're ideologues.
Well, and that's a statement based on emotion, not facts. The Pentagon guys are going to try to talk about facts. It's just like the fact is you can't have a war directly with Russia. Well, State Department members say, oh, yeah, sure, we can do that. Strength of will and all that.
And don't forget, despite, as you mentioned, there was some medical stuff as well as, how do I put this? Very inclusiveness in the army. Don't forget that the US and the UK are both struggling with enormous recruitment shortages. Like people just don't want to grab that rifle and go fight in these wars anymore. So that's something to also consider. I mean, the aircraft carrier, not the Ike or whichever, got recalled back home because
Gerald Ford, yes.
The Gerald Ford got called back home because basically there was staffing shortages. Other ships needed to be, crews needed to be cannibalized to keep it running. And the same happened with the single British aircraft carrier all the way back home. So it's not looking very good on the Western side of things.
We do have a few viewers. I want to thank Yashvir Singh for joining us. Hello, comrade. We've got Polly as usual. Hello, Polly. And she had a comment. Dutch MSM says that Russia is a poor country trying to take the wealth of the European. Yeah, there's a lot of anti-Russian propaganda being pushed, especially in Western Europe. No doubt.
I read a mainstream Dutch article. It was about Israel, and apparently the outgoing, what is it? Is he a president? Mark Rutte did a lot to polish the image of Israel. You know, not to do with Ukraine. This was just the Israel. Like anything that looks bad, don't do it. I mean, I don't even know when Geert Wilders actually gets sworn in and takes over, but it's something I read in the Dutch mainstream media. How are do you have farmers? Protests there, because I know they're in Germany now, they're in France, and I've seen the beginnings of videos in Scotland, so that might.
Are you asking me in the U.S.?
I'm asking Paulie. I think
Paulie. I'm not sure. Is she even in the Netherlands? I'm not sure where she's from, but maybe she is.
Well, she reads Dutch mainstream media, so I thought maybe.
Yeah, could be. I mean, yeah, it seems to be a pretty a regular phenomenon in Western Europe. The farmers are unhappy. Let's see, Mark, pro-Israel farmers are
farmers are quite irate, I imagine, just to finish that comment.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how much longer economically they're able to. I mean, I think it's useful to portray Russia as saying you're stealing Europe's wealth, because it's like, why are we getting poorer because Russia is stealing from us?
Most headlines won't even say Russia; they'll say Putin, just the man. It's him.
Well, boiling down an adversarial country to that strong man at the top is very popular. Because it's not even having to deal with the complexities of what those people want. Just saying, well, it's because there's this mad dictator.
Yeah,
who's controlling everything.
And we're all guilty of it. We're all conditioned to think in those terms, even though it's it doesn't reflect the reality and the complexity of reality. But yeah, everything's Putin. Back in the day, everything was Stalin. Everything is Xi in China, and it's that's not exactly how things work. And those kind of ways of thinking and talking about them can be they obfuscate a very complex reality. But yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that. I can't help it. And I always say we. I talk about the U.S. as like we, and I'm like, no, it's not really we. It's this ruling oligarchy, this psychopathic, class of elites that's running everything. It's not me. It's not us. They're opposed to us. But yeah, it's insidious how we think in those terms, and it's not conducive to really understanding reality and articulating reality.
I mean,
Paulie says, "Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. What does Paulie say?"
Law came into effect to force cities and villages to take up immigrants. Asylum centers are loaded.
Jesus, good luck, Paulie.
I mean, that's part of a concerted effort to dehomogenize society and make it easier to divide and capture, divide and conquer. I definitely feel bad for immigrants, and I'm not anti-immigrant, but the key is to not make people feel like they need to escape their country. So stop the imperialism, stop the bombing.
I mean,
let's develop the underdeveloped world like China would like to do, and we won't have an influx of immigrants, killing themselves to, come and collect welfare from your advanced, society. Well, I say advanced, I mean like industrialized society.
I mean,
well, it's like those it's just okay. the crocodile tears about all these Syrian and Middle Eastern refugees coming in while you have wars and occupations in those countries, and saying we have to take in unlimited immigrants. So it's just two sides of the same coin. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that Muammar al-Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, like a week before the occupation, the invasion, he called at the time, Tony Blair, big ears, Brown Blair is now Rishi Sunak. Anyway, he called him and said, what do you think is holding back a whole lot of impoverished African people from coming over to Europe? And it's me, it's this state. If you destroy this, you'll be flooded. And nobody listened. They bombed his country to hell to get basically open air slave markets. I mean, there is some guilt there, especially now. I've read that France is going to have a big increase in energy prices, right? Well, that's the cost of being booted out of Africa from just looting the resources there, unfortunately, and it will have to be paid. A lot of this is sins of the past, but the bill coming due is sort of how I see it. And I'm not happy how Europe is looking at the moment, but I certainly can't just blame people running from demolished countries.
And when we talk about Libya, we definitely need to mention that Obama, the first black president, was the most responsible for destroying the most prosperous country in all of Africa and having a return of the slave markets. It's an utter disgrace.
Mr. Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah,
he was the Nobel Peace Prize winner. He was the peace candidate, and then after he was elected, he became the warrior president. That I remember those. Those were the big headlines. Later on when he, the warrior president,
the drone president.
We can learn from that reality, the history of it, and we can see how they sell us, diversity, and they sell us, this leftist kind of approach, but in reality, it's just the same as it's the new boss, same as the old boss. So he had a war against the whistleblowers. He dropped more drone bombings than Bush, and definitely not didn't behave like he campaigned. I mean, we can see that same thing with Zelensky.
I was going to say the Nuland cabal under his VP Biden, basically the beginnings of the Ukraine project was also under Obama, even though it wasn't directly him.
Yeah, the Syria was under Obama. Ukraine was under Obama. Obama, they call him Obama for a reason. But, a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats just revere him and just wish he could have another term. And they're just confused about who he serves and, what his role was and how effective he was and what a benefit he was to this ruling establishment that's psychopathic.
Mm. And I love that sort of economic reality. As you said, they just blame Putin for everything. But, I've seen some old American lady go into the store and saying, $12 for eggs? Is it from Ukraine? I'm not going to pay that. That's the very simple one. But I mean, nowhere is it more stark right now than Britain, where Grant Shapps, the defense minister, is ready to go all out NATO. We're going to have war everywhere. And just a couple of headlines for you. 1 million more people living in poverty, UK, as the sail of the crisis is laid bare. This is from The Independent. The perfect storm pushes more British companies to the brink of bankruptcy, which is about 47,000. British firms basically at the brink of collapse. Nearly 5,000 Brits froze to death last year due to heating costs.
5,000?
Yep, that was from a study by basically one of these, I don't know, sustainability or whatever studies, but 5,000 froze because of the lack of room temperature in their houses. That's the rule Britannia, who once had an empire on which the sun did not set. And now apparently Putin has somehow, not Brexit, not the sanctions, has somehow, what's the good word for that, sabotage them in this way. So they have to have war.
Knees.
Yeah. Germany's not looking better. France is not looking better.
There was a headline about, I don't know, thousands of businesses on the brink of collapse also in the UK. I remember.
Yeah, that's it. 47,000. Yeah.
47,000 businesses close to collapse in the UK. Yeah, I mean, the strategy is to make Western Europe sacrifice and so far the sacrifice hasn't been to a very big extent, extended to U.S. citizens. And I'm happy about that, and hopefully they keep that up. Sorry, Ben.
Yeah,
But,
no, we're in the sacrificial zone, but I'm
Yeah.
very proud to be from Hungary with Slovakia bordering us and Serbia
Yeah.
on the other side. I mean, there is a resistance forming, and I'm really happy about that, which we can talk about later.
Well, I post a lot on Quora lately, so I get a lot of British commenters on there for some reason. And this is apparently a mainstream belief in the UK is that Russia was responsible for the Brexit vote. It was Russia who did that. Every bad thing that happens in the UK is from Russian interference. Russia is not just any country, but interfering specifically in the UK. It's very important, the most important country in the world, and Russia's ruining everything. It's not even like considered a conspiracy theory. It's a mainstream.
The
belief.
power this man has. Olaf Scholz blamed the Kulturkrieg, the culture war, was apparently behind the tractor, the farmers' protest, which is now labeled far right, by the way. That's also Putin. Apparently, he's got a lot of power in Europe. If you follow,
and he got Trump elected. He was responsible for this power outage in Texas last winter. I mean, there's a lot of things he gets blamed for.
He probably sabotaged the moon, the recent NASA moon mission, which also carried the Ukrainian flag. A lot of hopes were shattered when it burned up in the atmosphere. That was probably Putin too. Who, by the way, is going to North Korea in person, which is rare for someone of his stature. We had the foreign minister visit Lavrov, visit the Kremlin, and him in person, and she was there for 4 or 5 days. It was cute because you don't see a DPRK foreign minister. They're not used to interacting, and she was nervous, and Lavrov gave him a big bouquet of flowers to put her at ease, but it was sweet. But he's all the sanctioned big bads that used to be. I mean, Iran is now a part of the BRICS, but the DPRK is the new best friend, and friends everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, this was the thing that I wanted to see 10 years ago, and I was like, hey, Venezuela, Iran, North Korea, they really need to develop a tighter relationship, and because otherwise the West is going to try and pick them off one by one.
Yeah.
But okay, we have not talked about Israel. Do we want to hit some Israeli headlines or Palestine headlines?
Well, I mean, the first one that struck me, there's a video of this. Apparently, Netanyahu said no to negotiations, no to anything. We're just going to push on everywhere, including the Philadelphia corridor, which would be war with Egypt, including southern Lebanon, which is war with Hezbollah. That's his mania now. And then there was this video of the Knesset, the parliamentary group who does these big council meetings or whatever, being stormed by the parents of hostages, or Israeli hostages still in. And it looked like a big crisis moment. Like the people are getting unruly. I mean, there were daily protests against Netanyahu, saying he's not doing his job, not getting our sons and daughters back. But never have they actually pushed themselves into the Knesset meeting. That was, I think, significant.
So, and then shortly after that, is that correct that Netanyahu told the press that he has requested from Hamas to the back channels they have in UAE or whatever, that we start a 2-month ceasefire in exchange for a release of all the hostages?
I think I understood everything, but maybe you should move closer to the microphone because you get really muffled. Okay.
So shortly after the storming of the Knesset by these family members, am I getting the timeline correct that Netanyahu then leaked to the press or told the press that he has offered Hamas a 2-month ceasefire in exchange for a release of all the hostages? Is that how those chain of events went?
It is the latest headline, and that's from Axios, which is somewhere between Twitter and the table. That's what they like these bullet pointy stuff. And they got the scoop from an insider, unnamed insider.
But then Hamas has denied that they received that offer. Is that right?
Yeah, and that was in a Turkish, we didn't get such a back channel thing. But I think I may have read, but this is sort of telegrammy, rumory thing that they rejected it. So okay. That really is like today's news.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not looking good. He not him, but he has this ambassador to Europe, and this ambassador met the European foreign ministers, and like that's exactly how these ruthless landless people. And he offered that we should place all the Palestinians in Gaza onto this manufactured island somewhere in the Mediterranean, which is obviously rejected and caused a lot of outrage. Even Borrell, the Gardener of Europe, is saying this is no way to treat the Palestinians. So Europe is not going along a lot more of this the way the US seems to be. I mean, what they're doing in the US is feigning stuff. Like, we are really outraged at that hospitals and then the hospital bombing, and then Israel says, okay, we'll do a little investigation, and then Netanyahu says another defiant thing, and no real consequences. There's no shortage of weapons or material coming from the US, and of course there's still the Red Sea. Go.
I would say, I am astonished. I was guessing this would blow over in, a month or so. That's what I was thinking back after October 7th. And I really think in our Friday interview with Vladimir Goldstein, I think that's kind of correct. Because, if you asked me, because in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I mean, there's this understanding that Ukraine is the most important issue. They want to drag that out. They can't be distracted by a multi-month, high-intensity conflict in the Middle East. So I was thinking it'll blow over in a month or so. That's going to be enough time for Israel to do it, But we've come to this point where it's just escalating, dragging on and on with no end in sight.
Oh yeah, and it's no coincidence. Both of these conflicts are chewing through the PAC-3, the air defense missiles, which are a very limited supply.
So I think it's an accurate statement to say that the USA is not happy with the Israelis right now, but the Biden administration does not know how to use their leverage and has no alternative solution to bombing Gaza. Because Biden can say or Blinken can say all day over and over, well, we don't like it that you're bombing people. And then the Israelis say, okay, well, what do you want? What's the alternative? And they say, I don't know. It's just it's a circus.
But we'll send out another aircraft carrier, and the Brits will send some more little assets, and apparently the Netherlands and these, the old colonial countries say nothing's wrong with this. We'll send some more.
Say what you will about Trump. I think he would at the very least say, because he is pro-Israel. Let's not pretend he's not pro-Israel, but he'd say, okay, what is your strategy? What is your end state that you want? It would not be unconditional support. It would be conditional support, as in you need to tell me, and all this nonsense about creating artificial islands. It's just fantasy. Israel is often fantasy land, and Biden is a vegetable. So it's headless.
Yeah, but he would say, show me the deal. Where's the upside? Where's the downside? That's as we spoke last time.
And Trump did sit down with the Taliban. He doesn't care who you are. He'll sit down with you, and he likes that man-to-man communication. He's big on that.
I think Biden would be happy with a return of the two-state solution rhetoric from Israel. Like, that's what they want, because as long as they're giving the rhetoric, that makes it a lot easier to sell to everyone, and have a lot less people super angry, because at least you're saying, yes, we're gonna work towards the two-state solution, and that's just a synonym for the status quo of the past 3 decades.
Yeah,
it's like there's we just say that and say, hey, it's a process. We're doing the process. We're trying our best. And that's all they have to do. And that's so much easier for them than when Netanyahu goes, the two-state solution is dead. There's not going to be a two-state solution.
Neither side wants a two-state solution at this point.
Yeah.
Not even one side. Just nobody wants it now.
Neither does the resistance axis, which includes Iran.
Wants it. The EU wants it. And, the puppet Palestinian, Fatah, is giving lip service to it. But the Palestinians don't want it. The Israelis don't want it. The only ones that want it are, the U.S. and Western Europe, because it lessens the anger of their own population, and it appeases their own population that want to see justice and don't want their governments to, be supporting this obvious injustice and this moral, this immorality, basically unjust immorality.
And Europe, basically, I'd say it's basically economics. We want our shipping lanes open back. We don't want to pay all this extra on stuff coming from Asia, from China, from India.
But they're signing up to a military solution, right? The EU is signing up to a military solution to essentially, force the Red Sea open. And so that's an escalation in a sense. And I'm not sure that there is a way to, solve that militarily, but allegedly they've signed on to that plan.
They're going to get bogged down the same as the US. I mean, seriously, if you look at Yemen, for 10 years, they've been bombed, they've been invaded on land, and nothing happened to their forces. Yeah. It's exactly the same. But can I pick out a small detail, which I had to read down in an article? One was Voice of America, China version, CIA China, saying, look at the netizens in China are cheering these Houthi terrorists designated by the US, which is horrible. And the other one from the same outlet was Russian and Chinese ships are allowed to pass in the Red Sea. Okay, that's interesting. That's important. They can go wherever they want, trade with whoever they want. And a lot of the ships use that, saying all China crew, we're from China, they're broadcasting this. And then this was the most important thing in Politico, and it was just like a short title saying how to defeat the Houthis. And after listing everything that's happened, giving the context, it basically boiled down to, at some point, China would really need to have those naval corridors and the free shipping open, so they will be forced to do something, which I think is, the absolute unreality, because it's not bothering China and the least. They're there in Djibouti. They have ships, and they don't care. They don't move. They're having a suntan. And the other part of it is the US is so bad at solving problems that they're waiting for another like significant navy to solve their problems for them. I thought that was huge from a place like Politico. I don't remember the authors, but that's why I sort of put that, in italics, because what the hell?
Well, and it's strange because yes, you can't, it's without a ground invasion, you can't root out the problem within Yemen itself. But I mean, there's no I can't imagine a physical reason the U.S. Navy could not at least protect the ships passing through the Red Sea. I mean, it's not the Atlantic Ocean, for God's sake. It's not unrestricted U-boat warfare in World War II. It's a very narrow lane. It's strange to me. So I'm not sure why, unless there's some sort of fear of escalation with Iran or there's some capability in Yemen that we don't know about. It's odd to not put a dozen ships there and just clear the shipping rate.
They're worried that Yemen has access to anti-shipping missiles, and that they'll use them against U.S. Destroyer or whatever is protecting the lanes there. So I mean, that would be a disaster, right? I mean, I think that's why they're not doing it.
Well, Yemen itself has shot drones and missiles at ships. Quite a bit. Nothing yet. So it's, so it's like, so to imply that maybe Yemen has something better, but then we'd have to ask, why haven't they used them? If they're maybe waiting for more of a U.S. presence as possible, but it could also be something going on with Iran. Maybe it's strange that there's no solution at this late stage.
I think it's technically not strange. I just looked up the 2022, so the latest traffic through the Suez Canal, number of vessels, and it boils down to around 60,000, which is a lot, which if you just divide by 365, you get around 160 a day. Imagine having to follow each. I mean, you need a very significant fleet to follow each and every vessel passing through the Red Sea and then the Suez Canal. So I think it's just a thin stretch. I mean, sure, you can do the bombardment, you can try the land invasion, but ferrying everyone across with a warship of your own, you're going to run out of air defense missiles really fast. And you don't even have the ships to begin with, I think. And this was just a quickly browse the data on the Suez Canal.
I did fly over the Persian Gulf once. It's kind of the same thing. There's ships and ships, tankers, and cargo vessels as far as hundreds of them. Even at any given moment, you can just see them stretching to the horizon. So it's a lot of ships. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like a physically large distance, but I could see that just being a problem is just so many, and just setting out a speedboat to hijack a ship is not that difficult. It's hard to contain that, but
yeah, or just a couple of these $1,000 drone / missiles, and 2 million a shot to bring one down.
And I did.
Oh, by the way, the sexy pirate guy, he got banned off TikTok after he went viral. So no more heart. I think the title was the Houthi heartthrob. No more Western heartthrobs.
I didn't know that was a thing until I read that headline that you shared with me. But yeah, it's interesting how quick they are to make sure they don't get any good PR. And that's what I wanted to point out too, was the PR about the whole situation and how it's being spun, in the West and in the United States. So what's going on is there's a genocide in Gaza committed by Israel. Yemen is saying, hey, we're going to economically embargo Israel. We're going to, do what we can to make Israel stop this genocide. And, if they stop the genocide, we'll stop the embargo. Like, there's a very easy solution. There's a very just and humane and moral solution to this problem. And but the mainstream media wants to obfuscate this. They don't want Americans or Western Europeans to understand the basic reality of this situation, where all you have to do to end this blockade and to open up the shipping lanes is to stop a genocide. But instead of agreeing that, yeah, we need to stop this genocide, the West is like, oh, we're going to bomb Yemen. Yemen's going to think they can dictate that we stop a genocide. Fuck no, we're not going to stop a genocide. We're going to bomb Yemen. We're going to create another genocide in Yemen. We'll show those fuckers. So it's just so ridiculous how the mainstream media thinks that they can, warp people's perceptions about this very simple, basic situation. And get us to think that, the U.S. is doing good by bombing Yemen because they're championing free trade and open shipping lanes.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a blockade on all trade. That's how they sort of portray it. When it's obviously meant to blockade just Israel, no one else. And they're not happy that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, other places are basically going around that on land. Sorry.
Yeah, on land. Yeah. So they're rerouting, and they're allegedly, the trade that's being stopped going through the Red Sea, they've developed a land corridor, which isn't as bad as going around the Cape Horn, but it's better than, but how come the media isn't more forceful? Like, I would like to see the media being more forceful and, hey, why don't we just stop a genocide? Because, championing Yemen's point of view on it. You just don't see that in the establishment press. Why? Well, because the establishment press is owned by the same people that own both political parties and the, and the current regime in power.
Yeah, interestingly enough, you do get some outrage in Western Europe and the US about the treatment of the Palestinians, but you never get a positive spin on the Houthis at all, or the other resistance forces, just the innocent Palestinians. That's allowed to get through from time to time. By the way, I love the other impotent raids that came, I think, straight from the White House or the State Department said, we're putting you back, the Houthis, as in Ansar Allah, the movement, or you can call them the defense forces of Yemen, on the specially designated terrorist list, and we'll take you off if you stop the attacks. That's like sanctioning Hamas. What's that going to do? I mean, they really think that's going to achieve anything.
And I think the Houthis also declared the U.S., UK, and Israel also the biggest terrorists.
Yep.
So
by parliamentary votes.
Yeah.
Well, the terrorist designation is serious as far as sanctions go, because from what I understand, they had those peace negotiations with Saudi, and as part of that deal, they were taken off that list. So from a sanctions standpoint, it does matter. And I want to actually point out, just to contrast it, no Russian organization has been declared. I mean, they talked about it, but they used weasel words. They have not declared Wagner Group or any other. They've not declared Russia a state sponsor of terror. They haven't used any of the actual serious designations that would have serious economic consequences. I think it's very obvious why, because that would have serious economic consequences and political and legal consequences for American bodies too. But with little Yemen, with Houthis, they can do that. They can just say, you're a terrorist now, and cut off. any economic ties that are real established. So I would say it's not a meaningless gesture.
I mean, supposedly isolating when they had the power to isolate, but the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, has never come off that list, and they're part of BRICS now, and their trade is like booming with everybody in BRICS. So I think even that has less of a threat than it once did. But you're right, it would be much more serious. Like, for instance, putting Russia on the state sponsors of terrorism list.
It's disappointing to see Saudi Arabia so all on board against Yemen and working with Israel to bypass, the blockade and to develop a land route for delivering goods.
Oh, well, Saudi Arabia and Israel have been in bed for decades now. And, the Saudis did not shed any tears about bombing Yemen for 10 years.
Nope.
So.
Right. They did it fully on our behalf. I mean, we encouraged it. But, I was hoping there was going to be more of a withdrawal out of the U.S. camp and a more, a stronger alliance with China, with Russia. We saw hints of that when, Biden got snubbed in Saudi Arabia, when Blinken got snubbed in Saudi Arabia, and some of the things they were saying, and they were, negotiating a peaceful settlement of the war with Yemen. And that's still a process that's ongoing. But come on, Saudi Arabia. We want the clown prince to grow some balls and do the right thing, for humanity and for his own country and for sovereignty. But it's tough because, they've got a lot of investment in the United States. The United States has a lot of leverage over Saudi Arabia. And there's always the fear of, a coup kind of thing. And so it's not easy. I think there is some movement, out of the U.S. camp into the anti-imperialist camp, but it's just not going as fast as we would like it to go.
Yeah, they're not ready to fully defy the US. I think that's what's up. And Jordan is the most disappointing because they also feigned, Queen Rania and the king also feigned a lot of outrage at the treatment of the Palestinians, and it just doesn't translate into deeds. And that's basically a UK project, still is. Most of the armed forces, the intelligence services are designed, maintained by the UK. So as a colony as can be. But yeah, the Saudis did a lot of outrage too, and it just doesn't translate into. Iran called it just sever your ties with Israel now. Teach them to stop, and they won't do it.
Yeah.
They're just playing both sides. That's what they're doing at this point. Do we want to...
Doing the Turkish dance.
Do we want to talk about the U.S. elections?
Yes.
At all?
I'll let you guys talk about it.
Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say, the big news is, oh gosh, what's his name? The first guy to drop out.
DeSantis, right?
Before him, Vivek Ramaswamy, who was, I think, every serious person considered a nobody. He dropped out first. He dropped out immediately after the Iowa caucus. And he was a libertarian. Like before the show, we were talking about the libertarians. He was the big libertarian darling who, honestly, he looks like a villain. Like if you pull up a picture of him, he looks like one of the bad guys from Hunger Games. Like I'm almost not even exaggerating. It's like he's got the hair and everything. But he dropped out immediately. He was never a serious candidate. And the thing about American elections, too, is a lot of those, like, how do you have 10 to 12 people who seriously think they have a chance of becoming president? Well, the answer is they don't. Like, if you have 12 candidates, 9 or 10 of those candidates are just maneuvering to get a cozy position in the new administration because you're like, oh, now people know who he is. He can maybe get some sort of position in the new administration for one of the actual serious candidates. But then DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, he dropped out and backs Trump too, which is an extra step. Because
by the way, in the U.S. electoral process, that means if he got some delegates or zones, that goes to Trump, right? Now, is that how that works?
Well, he dropped out, so he's not going to be getting any votes.
Oh, sorry, this is just the primary. That's when it gets to the whole electoral college, which I also don't understand. You got very complicated elections.
It's anti-democratic democracy.
Yeah. Well, so the way the electoral, to answer your question just really quick, so the electoral college, the way that works is so it's not a direct vote like in most European countries. or all European countries, maybe. It's basically because the USA is, a federal system. It is basically a federation. It gives a lot of, it's very state oriented. So instead of just counting the raw number of votes, it says, okay, so you win individual states, and then the number of votes that state is allotted based on population go to that person. So that's why you have those 270. You need a minimum of 270 electoral votes from the states, not the voters who.
I see, yeah. That's a whole separate arena.
So nobody is trying to get more votes than the other person. They're trying to get more electoral college votes. And then some states are winner take all. So even in California, if 40% vote Republican, the Democrats get all of those electoral college. That's in the main. That's not the primary. That's in the general election. But it's rather undemocratic. And it's
but does force, and this is actually kind of what screwed Hillary Clinton in particular, because I will say, I don't know, maybe I disagree with you on this. I do think for us, it's a pretty fair system because it does force presidential candidates to campaign across the country. Because if it was just raw number of votes, you could just campaign in Texas, California, New York, Florida, and ignore everyone else. You could just for those 4 or 5 states. But this forces you really to actually reach out to people in each region, which Hillary did not do. She ignored the Midwest. She was just like, oh, I'm going to win. Didn't bother to campaign.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. That was Putin.
It was Putin, of course.
He spent $5,000 on Facebook ads, and bam, he got himself a president puppet.
Not even $5,000, 5,000 rubles. He spent 5,000 rubles on Facebook ads.
So I want to support your point about the audition. So that's kind of what, you have all these people running for president, and they're just kind of auditioning for the ownership class, for the ruling class. And they're saying, look, I can help you. I can benefit you. Put me in this spot. Put me in this spot. I can sell your policies. I'm very charismatic. I make sense. I appeal to the plebs, to the poors. So use me. That's kind of what I think that a lot of these candidates are doing, and they're looking out for their own selfish interests. They want to move up, they want power, etc. And they're just telling the wealthy elites, hey, I'm somebody that you can use.
And then in exchange, you get the beautiful headlines. I just want to say, because the media really wants Nikki Haley to happen. Like US websites are flooded with how she's wonderful.
I'll make a prediction though. You guys can hold me to this. I think it's very likely, like 90% likely, we will see a Trump DeSantis Republican ticket. And I think that's why. Yes, because DeSantis could have just dropped out and said, you know what, screw Trump, support, you
endorsed him.
Navalny was like, oh, vote for the opposite of of United Russia, vote communist. DeSantis did not do that. He just said, I endorse Trump. So I think that's lobbying. It's like, hey, because DeSantis is a much more mainstream Republican candidate than Trump. So that's him signaling, I'm willing to work with you. And I think it's very likely Trump will be smart enough to accept that offer and say, you know what, you can be my VP. I think that's very likely.
So you're going out on a limb. I mean, we're going to hold you to that. I would disagree, and I would say that Trump will never do that because he couldn't trust DeSantis. So he already had a VP that he couldn't trust last time, and he wouldn't make that same mistake again. I think what explains DeSantis' willingness to endorse Trump, because it seems, I was surprised, but when I thought about it, I'm like, DeSantis has his own political career to think about. And so he did it for himself, because you can't go against Trump and still be a viable Republican in today's Republican Party.
But the thing is, DeSantis is a very seasoned politician. He is a governor. And the thing is, look at what happened to Mike Pence. He turned on Trump. Trump badmouthed him. Now Mike Pence is a nobody. He's a nobody.
Yeah.
He will never be a vice president. He won't be a vice anything ever again. He just,
he barely registers. Single.
Yeah, he could have been the president if he'd played his cards a little differently, but he didn't. And so he's
well, he had more loyalty to the ruling establishment than he did to his own political prospects or
Yes.
to any kind of principles. But no, so you're agreeing with me then, right?
No, actually, no, I'm not, because Mike Pence turned on Trump, and that incinerated his political chances. DeSantis read the room. I think DeSantis is probably pretty good at reading the room, looking around. It's like, okay, how do people in this room feel? He's like, you know what? If I turn on Trump, I'm toast. I might not even have a chance of being governor anymore. I might not. So I think that's offering the olive branch to Trump, say, I'm willing to work with you. And that's also signaling to voters that he's willing to work with Trump. And so they won't crucify him like Mike Pence.
But I think people can sense that, he's doing that not out of any kind of actual loyalty, but out of self-interest, and that in reality, he's not loyal to Trump. And I think Trump would get that.
Well, Trump has to nominate someone.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think he would do Ramaswamy before he went with. The
problem with him is that he's an idiot. Ramaswamy, or however the hell you say his name. I mean, his parents have money. He has money. It doesn't make him smart. He doesn't strike me as a smart person, or even relevant. Because Trump doesn't like losers. I mean, he's said that repeatedly. It's like, I don't debate losers. I don't think he'll even acknowledge the guy again. But DeSantis is a big guy. I think Trump will appreciate.
It'll be interesting to watch, and definitely we will have a follow-up discussion and see how it plays out. I don't know. I don't have any real thoughts on who Trump's VP pick would be. First, he's got to win the Republican primary, right? He's got to win the Republican primary, and I'm not sure that's going to happen. The Supreme Court could veto that, or he could come down with a bad case of lead poisoning. Like, there's things that can derail Trump's winning of the Republican primary. But I don't think an actual Democratic vote is one of those things. I think if there's a legitimate vote and they allow, a legitimate democratic process, Trump would win, obviously in a tremendous landslide, maybe in a bigger landslide than he won, the historic landslide in 2016. So that's the thing. Like, either DeSantis was just out of self-interest saying, I endorse Trump, because he knows that if he didn't do that, then he would be a nobody, like Pence is a nobody, or he's pretty certain that there's a strategy in play to make sure that no matter who endorses Trump, he's not going to be able to, he's not going to be the nominee. And so there could be a process in play. Who knows what it is? It could be the Supreme Court. It could be, I don't know. It could be keeping him off the ballot. But they might have a strategy in place to make sure he's not the nominee. And then who cares? Everybody can endorse him without any fear that endorsement is going to actually end up with his Trump presidency.
Well, I don't think DeSantis himself personally cares. I think he's just maneuvered himself because if he thought there was some grand scheme to keep Trump from winning the nomination, then DeSantis would not have dropped out. But the way he's done it now, I think DeSantis is in a good position to be nominated by whoever wins, Nikki Haley or Trump. He's in a good position.
In what conditions would Nikki Haley be able to win?
Well, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, she's just she's so unlikable. I wouldn't say she's as unlikable.
80% of Americans fall into a coma, maybe. She has
maybe if we get a pandemic 20 times worse than the last one, which they were talking about at Davos, then we would have enough mail-in ballots to get her the victory.
That's a possibility. I was going to say we will follow the horse trading as it goes. You guys can get as involved as you want, but I'd like an external perspective, and this was fascinating. I read 2 articles. One was in Foreign Affairs Journal, and it said China's rise cannot be stopped, but the hegemony can. Basically, if you go down, it prescribed that the countries, the colonies, Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, well, they'll have to develop and pay for their own defense. And the second one was The Economist, the bourgeoisie in London, came out with this one, and this was this weekend, so this is fresh. What it said was, going back to Europe, sorry. The world braces for Donald Trump's return, who can split countries into users, bruisers, and losers, which is kind of catchy. But if you go down to it, shit, and it comes from Britain, remember. We'll have to make fucking deals with this guy because it's not going to be like blanket support. And he already said, Taiwan might have to fend for itself. We're not going to defend Europe. So I rather enjoy the wave of panic this is sending for European elites.
Now, what about the idea that Trump could, the ruling establishment might work some kind of a deal with Trump where Trump agrees to certain concessions and limits himself on certain positions where he doesn't, attack the real heart of, the ruling establishment, and they allow him, to be the president? Like, is that a possibility that they come to some kind of a deal? Because Absolutely. I also heard that at Davos, nobody was really frightened or concerned. They weren't talking about, oh shit, Trump might win the primary. So that leads me to believe that either they have a strategy in place to keep him out and they're not worried, or they've negotiated some kind of a deal where he's going to, stay within certain velvet ropes of polite, establishment discourse.
It's a huge possibility what you're saying. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, landed in New York for a big UN session and also sideline meetings with different leaders. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, for us, a Biden and a Trump presidency really makes no difference. So he sees a continuation of policy, and I think you might be right. This might just be panic from the headlines and some elites, but it could be more of the same.
It's hard to say. I don't know if either Trump or the Biden establishment is smart enough to reach such a compromise.
Yeah, to tame him.
They might keep playing this game of chicken with each other and lumping these criminal charges on him. Because the longer he keeps persisting, the more charges they lump on him. It's very obvious. It's becoming a zero. I think it's a zero.
And it seems to help him. The lawsuits, the shit they dump on him, it just seems to help him every step of the way from the outside.
If you're portraying yourself as a martyr, I mean, it's great that the other side obliges your PR campaign by making you out to be a martyr. I mean, the Democrats are his best publicity agency. They really are.
Okay, what about the idea that things have gotten so bad and there's no clear path, there's no winning strategy, that they're okay just handing this mess to Trump and saying, you try and fix it. We're going to be attacking you the whole time, and you have your 4 years. We're going to, make sure that you're the most failed, miserable president to ever exist. And they just hand him the reins. They can do your best. Like, what about that? Is that a possibility?
They might not have a choice. I mean, already Biden is known for the Kabul humiliation of the U.S. armed forces, and he might get known for the collapse of Ukraine, in which case there's no reasonable way for him to stay in power. I don't know. That seems to me not like anything planned, but, shit, we have no other way, but Ian might think differently.
I don't think anyone plans more than 12 months ahead in this train we're on. I think that's too far out. I don't think, it doesn't look like anyone has any long-term planning. I don't see any evidence of long-term planning here.
But one thing we could say for certain, they're trying to keep the Ukraine project alive for as long as possible. Probably hoping for for November.
Yeah, until after.
I don't know if that's possible.
When is the New Hampshire vote? That's the next one in the primary.
It's the next one, but I don't know when.
I don't know.
I would assume soon.
And what about the Democrats not allowing any Democratic challengers? So the Democratic Party is, again, a private corporation. They can do what they want. They're a privately owned corporation, and they've decided that they don't want to allow anyone to run against Biden. What do you guys think about that strategy?
I don't think it's unprecedented. I don't think it's unprecedented if you have your guys like, okay, we're going to run them again. I'm not sure. I can't say this. I don't think it's unprecedented, but it would be embarrassing if Biden just collapsed at some point soon, which, I mean, he's old enough. He could. So I wouldn't say it's unfair or unprecedented, but it's a bit it might be a bit of a risk. I think they're really going to keep him drugged up as he needs to be to get through the election. I think that's the plan right now.
And I think part of the reason they're not allowing these small names, like there's a few people who are running on the Democratic ticket, but they're not being allowed on the ballot because I think it would be embarrassing for the Democratic Party and for Biden when they did really well in certain states. And, you know, they don't want to deal with that headache and that embarrassment of these nobodies doing so much better than Biden possibly. So they just said, you know what, we're not going to allow democracy this time. Maybe next time when things are different, we can give you guys a little bit of democracy. But right now, things are too dangerous for us. Our you know, things are we're way too much threat to allow democracy to compound the problems we have. What's this, Ben?
I wanted to show you, this was 2 days ago from the official Democratic Party Twitter account with 2 million or something followers. I love that they used the picture. It's 4 more years. The basic, what it visually tells me is we've turned our back on you, but the actual title is 4 more years with the zombie and Kamala. I just thought it was the top of irony.
Well, you know, the thing is, you know, when, you know, like with Obama or with Clinton, you know, if you just say, okay, we're going to run another 4 years with this guy, that's normally not a particularly controversial statement. But when you have someone with as many problems, both personal and as the administration as a whole, it upsets more people, because I think there was a lot of internal hope that they were just going to not run him a second time.
Yeah, I mean, he freezes up more than Mitch McConnell does nowadays. He talks with invisible people, shakes hands with. He has to be guided off stage. He's basically a zombie. I don't know how he has to live 4 more years. You know?
Is Kamala going to be the VP in the next general, or is he going to pick somebody else?
I did not see an announcement, but that's what the picture suggests.
Yeah, you wouldn't run a picture like that and then immediately replace her. And I think if you replace the VP, that suggests there are problems. I mean, Nixon's
or it acknowledges.
Yes.
So I mean, is that what they're really their plan is, to allow him and Kamala 4 more years, and then if he can't make it, which it doesn't seem that he could, then it'll be Kamala? Like, is that really what they're going to be offering the country? Because that seems so astonishing to me, and I have to believe that something is going to change. He's going to drop out, and they're going to put a stand in at the last minute. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine that that's what they're going to, that's their actual play. But we'll know by November.
For now, it looks that way. Yeah, we'll see.
Biden gets very little. He speaks very little. I think that is the plan. They're just going to keep him in the back room as much as possible. And I think worst case scenario, if he didn't live 4 more years, I think it's entirely. I mean, I think Kamala is a stand-in, but she wouldn't have any chance of actually being. I'd be astonished if we had Kamala as a president. I think they would bring in, and because you can, if you look at the Constitution does specify the chain of command, if you will. So you're not required to make the vice president the president if something happens to him. They could put in Anthony Blinken or someone else if they.
Who decides that? That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was a direct line of.
Yeah, I thought it was.
I mean, it's a normal direct one, but you can skip it. You know, there's a process to it. I actually don't remember off the top of my head what it is, but there's several. Because you have your line. You have starting with the president, vice president, Speaker of the House. The Secretary of State is another.
But I would imagine Kamala would have to agree to it. Like, they couldn't just coup her. Like, she would be next in line, and then she would have to agree.
I don't think it's actually. I'm gonna have to look this up. Maybe that's a topic for the next one, because I don't know.
Maybe
it's you do need to get other people's consent, though. I do think there's some congressional. I unfortunately don't know. Unfortunately, it's like it's embarrassing, because it's one of those high school civics class things. You know, what's the process? I don't actually remember what it is, but
maybe more college level civics, because
maybe. But yeah, because I think she'd be so unpopular to be pushed back to making her the president. I think you can skip her. It's possible. I know that for a fact. It's possible to skip the vice president.
You would imagine that everybody would be up for skipping her. But I mean, I would have thought they'd up for skipping Biden, you know, and yet They're not.
Well,
all right, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna wrap us up. I mean, been almost an hour and a half. But if anybody has any additional.
No, I was going to say 4 years Kamala, you will have like everything like Boeing going bad right now, all the allies turning their backs. It would just speed everything up. So in a way, I'm not that against it.
What is that word? Accelerationist. That's like the accelerationist perspective.
Yeah. She's my accelerationist candidate, I guess. Wow, that's weird.
Okay, well,
same as Ursula in Europe.
Paulie thanks us for our service. We got Jeremy Turner. Trump is a great distraction, the progressive element in USC only. This supposed Hitler, no outside world.
True enough, Jeremy.
All right, we will reconvene on Friday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ian. We'll see you guys on Friday. Thank you very, very much. Bye.